Help support Name Explained by leaving a like and a comment, sharing this video, and by subscribing to the channel. Japanese is infamously a very confusing language to learn, whether that be speaking it, writing it, or reading it, especially as a non-native to the language. One of the main reasons Japanese can be so confusing for people learning it is due to the fact that in its written form it has three different writing systems, and Japanese writing tends to fluctuate between the three of them without much warning or notice. The three writing systems are called hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Those first two of hiragana and katakana are the closest we have to an alphabet like the Latin one. The characters of these syllabaries, also known as kana, represent specific sounds and symbols. For example, this kana of hiragana and this kana of katakana both make a sound similar to the sound of the Latin alphabet, and while the standard Latin alphabet has 26 characters, hiragana and katakana both have around 46 standard characters each. That's just shy of 100 sound-based characters across two syllabaries you have to know. And you may be thinking, why are there two of these? We saw that both hiragana and katakana have symbols that represent the A sound, so why not just have one? These two syllabaries exist because they are used for different kinds of words. To explain them in a very oversimplified manner, hiragana is used for native Japanese words, while katakana is used for foreign words, which have been introduced to Japanese. This makes katakana words kind of fun in my eyes. They often sound like broken English version of words. In example, the Japanese word for announcer is written in katakana and is pronounced as announcer. That's already quite confusing to say the least. Two syllabaries which feature similar sounds represented with different characters which have use depending on the origin of the word. Yet, then we have kanji, which is a whole different beast unto itself. Kanji characters do not represent specific sounds like we see in hiragana and katakana. Instead, these symbols represent entire words or ideas. For example, this kanji character means forest, and what's extra cute about it is that it's made up of three of the kanji symbols for trees, which reflects the fact a forest is a collection of trees. Kanji is difficult for a few reasons. First off, there are thousands upon thousands of kanji symbols, with some sources claiming there are around 50,000 of these little guys. It's pretty much impossible for a native Japanese speaker to know every single symbol of kanji, let alone someone learning it as a foreign language. The other big issue with kanji is that you can't really figure out what a symbol says without already being told what it means. As mentioned, kanji is logographic. The symbols don't represent the sounds they make when said out loud. You can't sound out a kanji symbol or anything like that. The only way you are going to know what a piece of kanji means is if you have previously been taught that specific piece of kanji already. If you come across some kanji you have never seen before and there's no one around to tell you what it means, you're screwed. Except you would be screwed if Japanese hadn't already figured out a way to deal with this issue. Yeah, Japanese knows all too well that kanji can prove confusing, so to combat the confusion of kanji, another fourth kind of writing system was created, a kind of language which helps and guides Japanese readers through kanji, and even other words they may not be all that familiar with, and this guiding language is called furigana. Okay, so calling it a fourth writing system or even a language probably isn't the most accurate, but I'm probably going to call this video Japan's guide language or something like that, so I needed to mention it here. If I call this video something else entirely, then that's completely pointless, so never mind. A more accurate term for furigana would instead be a reading aid, and it exists to aid readers who are struggling with specific words and symbols. The name of furigana translates into meaning something along the lines of annotating kana, which is very fitting with how it is used, as we shall see. The word of furigana is written like this in Japanese and is made of three kanji symbols and one piece of hiragana, which shows us why this reading aid needs to exist in the first place. It's also known as yomigana, which means something along the lines of pronounced kana, and also known as ruby. More on that name a tad later. The main purpose of this reading aid is to guide readers in how kanji symbols they're not familiar with are pronounced. So how exactly does this quote-unquote guide language work? Is it written in yet another syllabary of Japanese or something else entirely? Well, thankfully not. Furigana simply uses the hiragana characters, though in some cases katakana or even the Latin alphabet can be used. And the furigana is simply placed either to the right of the kanji if the script is vertical, or above the kanji if the script is horizontal. Modern Japanese can go both ways when being written down, which is a whole thing we've covered in a separate video about written language directionality. So, say an example, you see a sign in Japan with this kanji written on it. As someone still figuring out Japanese and grasping the plethora of kanji the language has, you are completely stumped. There's no one around to ask for help, and you have no singles, so you can't Google it or anything like that. All hope is lost. until you notice that above the kanji is some hiragana. This is furigana at work, and it's your guiding light in figuring out what this kanji actually says. The hiragana is familiar to you. You know that this one makes a to-like sound, this one makes an u-like sound, this one makes a ki-like sound, this one makes a u-like sound, and this one once again makes an u-like sound. Say them all together and you have a word that sounds like Tokyo. And not only do you know that this is in fact the kanji for Tokyo, but you're in fact getting closer to the capital of the nation. This is a prime example of how furigana is used. Those unfamiliar with these characters can use furigana to sound out the kanji, though I imagine most Japanese people would probably know the kanji for Tokyo. Yet even if they didn't, now they know it, it could help them out next time they come across this symbol on a sign, or even see those kanji characters being used in a different context. Furigana has been around for quite some time in Japan too, originally written out by hand. While I'm sure people do still do it like this, it seems that many devices like word processors, an example, are able to do it automatically, with the furigana sitting neatly over the symbol they're being used to help people with. The exact location of furigana seems to be a big deal, with its Wikipedia page having a whole entry discussing its alignment rules and typing. But what you really need to know is that it goes on top of the kanji it represents. I'm sure you don't need to go on a whole typesetting tangent, that wouldn't be too exciting. In Japan itself, furigana is mostly linked with kids. Children learning how to read for the first time often helped along with furigana. It's seen in kids reading books at school, and even appears in manga aimed more towards younger children. Apparently in Japan, hiragana is the first script that kids learn, then they move on to katakana and kanji. This means that furigana could even be used on top of katakana words kids might not be familiar with. Hiragana on top of katakana helps these kids come to grips with the other syllabary of Japanese. These kids have a huge amount to learn, that's for sure. But furigana is used with way more than just children. It can be seen in public places, on signs at train stations for example. Many place names in Japanese are written with unique kanji, so if you live in Osaka, for example, you might not be familiar with the kanji characters used in somewhere like the Nagasaki tram line or the Kyoto metro line. Having furigana on these signs once again helps those unfamiliar with these place names in kanji, especially for tourists who don't speak the language at all. The rarer kanji will almost always have furigana above them too. As mentioned, there's tens of thousands of kanji symbols. In Japanese schools, kids are taught the joyo kanji, which means the daily use kanji. This is a list of 2,136 symbols that the Japanese government have agreed upon are the key ones that everyone needs to know. While 2,000 plus is still a huge amount to remember, it's far from all of them, meaning it's inevitable that kids and grown-ups will come across kanji they weren't taught in school. Luckily, furigana comes to the rescue in these cases. Some kanji characters can also be pronounced in different ways, with furigana once again being able to clear up how a kanji symbol is pronounced in that specific context. Furigana is a shining light in the stormy seas that Japanese can be, helping natives and non-natives navigate this seriously confusing tongue. While it has ample benefits, there's one drawback I noticed about it. While it can tell you how a kanji character is pronounced, it doesn't really tell you what it actually means. Going back to our Tokyo example, while its furigana tells you the sounds of these symbols, and you could work out it's pronounced as Tokyo, it doesn't tell you what Tokyo actually means. Like, it doesn't explain how it's the name of a city or anything like that. Once again, you kind of just need to know it already. And I guess this is an issue from my perspective, as I don't speak Japanese. If you already understand hiragana, then I imagine most furigana makes sense. It is a reading aid after all, not a translation tool. Also, that's just my own musings on the matter. If there's something I've completely overlooked and it does help explain what words mean, please let me know down below. Beyond this, however, furigana is a really helpful thing. So helpful in fact that Japanese isn't actually the only language to feature a reading aid like this. Similar aids are featured in other East Asian languages like Chinese and Korean when it comes to understanding their logograms of Hanzi and Hanja respectively. They work in the same way, using the language's phonetic syllabaries to guide readers through their logograms. Collectively, these kinds of reading aids are known as Ruby characters, Ruby texts, or Ruby words, which finally explains to us why furigana is also known as Ruby. See, I promise you we'll come back to that. I find this name of ruby word really pleasant. Rubies are really precious things, and these reading aids can be equally precious for those trying to decipher these logograms. Yet this isn't why they're named after these valuable red stones. This name instead seems to relate to the world of typography. Man, I tried to avoid the topic, but here we are. A ruby is a British term for a typographical measurement. It's roughly 1/13 of an inch. This is the spacing that was given between a kanji symbol and the hiragana above it. So the word was applied to this kind of reading aid. Why was this measurement called a ruby in the first place, however? Well, according to the Dictionary of Typography, the two measurements between a ruby are called a pearl and a diamond for some reason. So calling this one a ruby was just keeping to the nomenclature which had already been established. And yeah, it's seemingly just a coincidence that these typographical measurements share their names with three of the best games from one of Japan's most beloved exports. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explain YT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.